Welcome to Hercule Hub, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot unravels captivating mysteries.
In the shadowed halls of Nemean Hall, a glass of wine turns deadly, and Lady Beatrice Ashford falls silent forever. Was it greed, betrayal, or a long-buried secret that poisoned her last breath? Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, steps into a web of lies where everyone hides something. Who tampered with the lights? Why does a strange spoon hold a clue? And what truth was so dangerous it led to murder? Unravel the mystery in Hercule Poirot's novel secrets and surprising twists, if you dare. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Nemean Hall. The late September sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Nemean Hall, a stately Georgian manor nestled in the rolling hills of Hertfordshire. The air was crisp, scented with damp earth and the faint musk of autumn roses. The hall, with its ivy-clad facade and towering chimneys, stood as a monument to old wealth and older secrets, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. Inside, the atmosphere was one of forced civility, a delicate veneer stretched taut over simmering tensions. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, stood in the grand entrance hall, his suitcase at his feet. He adjusted his tie, feeling faintly out of place among the polished oak paneling and ancestral portraits. The invitation to Nemean Hall had come unexpectedly, penned in the elegant hand of Lady Beatrice Ashford, the widowed mistress of the estate. A small gathering, the letter had promised, to discuss matters of mutual interest. Hastings, never one to resist a summons from the upper echelons, had accepted, though he sensed an undercurrent of purpose beneath the polite phrasing. The drawing room, where the guests were assembling, hummed with restrained chatter. Hastings surveyed the company, his soldierly instinct for observation kicking in. Lady Beatrice, a statuesque woman in her late 50s, presided over the room with the poise of a duchess. Her silver hair was swept into an impeccable chignon, and her emerald gown whispered of Paris couture. Yet her eyes, sharp and searching, betrayed
pearl necklace, her wide eyes darting nervously. Hastings noted her unease, wondering what a London stage star was doing in this remote manor. Dr. Leonard Grayson, a physician with a gaunt face and meticulous manners, conversed quietly with Mrs. Evelyn Mortimer, a sharp-tongued widow whose fortune was rumoured to rival Lady Beatrice's. Evelyn's son, Julian Mortimer, a lanky youth with a sullen air, lounged in an armchair, sketching idly in a notebook. Finally, there was Mr. Victor Crane, a solicitor with a pinched face and wire-rimmed spectacles, who seemed perpetually on the verge of delivering bad news. The ormolu clock on the mantel struck 6, its chimes reverberating through the room. Lady Beatrice clapped her hands lightly. "My friends," she began, "I have gathered you here for a purpose most delicate. As you know, my late husband, Lord Henry Ashford, left behind a legacy not only of wealth but of complications. Tonight I intend to resolve a matter concerning his estate, one that affects us all." Her words hung in the air, met with a ripple of murmurs. Sir Reginald's brow furrowed, Clara's fingers tightened on her necklace, and Julian's pencil stilled. Before Lady Beatrice could elaborate, the double doors swung open, and a footman announced, "Mr. Hercule Poirot." All eyes turned to the diminutive figure, who entered with the precision of a metronome. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache a masterpiece of symmetry, surveyed the room with the calm assurance of a man who knew his own genius. His green eyes, bright as a cat's, missed nothing. "Mon cher Hastings," Poirot exclaimed, crossing the room with a spring in his step. "You did not tell me you were to be in such illustrious company. Hastings grinned, relieved by the familiar sight of his friend. "I wasn't sure myself until I arrived. Lady Beatrice invited me, and well, here we are." Poirot inclined his head towards Lady Beatrice. "Madame, it is an honor. Hercule Poirot is at your service." Lady Beatrice's smile was genuine this time, though tinged with something Hastings couldn't quite place. Relief, perhaps, or apprehension.
Monsieur's expression remained inscrutable, though his fingers drummed lightly on the arm of his chair, a sure sign his little grey cells were already at work. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight. The meal was exquisite: consommé, roasted pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé, but the conversation was stilted, punctuated by forced pleasantries. Hastings, seated between Clara and Dr. Grayson, noted the actress's trembling hands and the doctor's meticulous habit of aligning his cutlery. Across the table, Julian Mortimer barely touched his food, his eyes fixed on his mother with an intensity that bordered on hostility. As the dessert plates were cleared, Lady Beatrice rose, glass in hand. "To harmony," she toasted, though her voice wavered. The guests echoed her, but the clink of glasses felt hollow. It was then that the lights flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness. A gasp, a clatter of glass, and a muffled cry broke the silence. When the lights returned, Lady Beatrice was slumped in her chair, her face ashen, her hand clutching her throat. A glass of wine lay shattered at her feet, its contents pooling like blood on the polished floor. Dr. Grayson was at her side in an instant, his fingers searching for a pulse. "She's dead," he said, his voice flat with shock. "Poison, I'd wager. There's a faint, bitter almond scent." The room erupted into chaos. Clara's scream, Sir Reginald's bellow, Evelyn's sharp demand for calm. Hastings felt his heart race, but Poirot, serene as ever, rose and raised a hand. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "Calm yourselves. Hercule Poirot is here, and he will find the truth. Let us begin." He turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mon ami, the game is afoot. Observe and tell me, what do you see?" Hastings, still reeling, managed a nod. The quiet elegance of Nemean Hall had shattered, and in its place lay a puzzle only Poirot's little grey cells could solve. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Crime. The dining room at Nemean Hall, moments ago a stage for refined civility, now bore the awe at his friend's composure. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a sign that his little grey cells were already weaving order from chaos. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice steady and authoritative. "We must proceed with method. A crime has been committed, and Hercule Poirot will not permit it to go unanswered. Dr. Grayson, you have confirmed the cause?" Dr. Leonard Grayson, still kneeling beside Lady Beatrice, nodded grimly. "Poison, almost certainly cyanide. The scent is unmistakable, and her symptoms, convulsions, rapid collapse, are consistent. Death would have been near instantaneous." "Bon," Poirot said, clasping his hands behind his back. "Then we begin. No one is to leave this room until I have spoken with each of you. Hastings, mon ami, please ensure the doors are secured." Hastings, jolted into action, moved to the double doors and checked the locks, grateful for a task to steady his nerves. The footman, pale and trembling, stood by the wall, clearly unsure whether to act or flee. Poirot's gaze settled on him briefly before returning to the guests. "First, the wineglass," Poirot said, stepping carefully toward the broken shards. He crouched, his movements precise, and examined the fragments without touching them. "The poison. It was in the wine, n'est-ce pas? But was it intended for Lady Beatrice alone, or was it a reckless act against all who drank? We must know Sir Reginald Ashford.
His face flushed with a mix of brandy and indignation, slammed a fist on the table. "This is outrageous! Are you suggesting one of us did this? Beatrice was family, damn it!" Poirot raised an eyebrow, unruffled. "Monsieur, I suggest nothing. I observe. And I observe that Lady Beatrice spoke of a codicil to her husband's will. A matter of great import, no? Perhaps it stirred passions. Perhaps it stirred fear." Clara Vane, the actress, let out a stifled sob, her hands twisting the pearl necklace until it seemed the strand might snap. "She was so kind to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would anyone?" Mrs. Evelyn Mortimer, seated opposite, fixed Clara. "I left the dining room briefly to fetch the dessert tray. The decanter was on the sideboard." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. "Merci. And the toast everyone drank, yes?" A murmur of assent rippled through the room, though Julian Mortimer, the sullen youth, spoke up sharply. "I didn't. I don't care for wine. Mother will tell you I stuck to water." Evelyn Mortimer nodded curtly. "It's true. Julian's particular about his drinks." Poirot's gaze lingered on Julian, whose sullen expression had hardened into defiance. "Très intéressant," Poirot murmured. "And you, Monsieur Crane?" "You drank?" Victor Crane, the solicitor, adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I did, yes. A small sip. It tasted normal, I think." "Normal," Poirot echoed, his tone faintly amused. "A word that conceals much. We shall see." He moved to Lady Beatrice's chair, examining the table setting with meticulous care. His fingers hovered over a small silver spoon beside her plate, its bowl faintly discolored. "Curieux," he muttered, then straightened. "Dr. Grayson, you will assist the police when they arrive, but for now, no one touches the body or the glass. The scene, it must remain pure Hastings." Standing by the door, felt a chill at Poirot's words. The police would come, of course. Lady Beatrice's death would summon the local constabulary. But he knew Poirot would not wait for their plodding methods. Already his friend was constructing a mental map of the crime, each detail a piece in his intricate puzzle. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, "do you think the poison was meant for her specifically, or could it have been a mistake?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A mistake, Hastings? No, no. Hercule Poirot does not believe in such convenient accidents. The poison was placed with intent, and the intent was murder. But why, and by whom? That is the question." He turned to the guests, his voice taking on a theatrical edge. "Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, had the opportunity. The decanter was unguarded. The lights flickered at a most convenient moment. But opportunity is not enough. There must be motive, and motive lies in the heart. Tell me, what was this codicil of which Lady Beatrice spoke? What signaled the arrival of the local police, summoned by a servant who had slipped out during the chaos?" Poirot stepped back, allowing the authorities to take charge. But Hastings knew his friend was far from idle. As the inspector, a gruff man named Japp, known to Poirot from past cases, began barking orders, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Observe, mon ami," he whispered. "The faces, the hands, the eyes. They tell stories the lips will not. Already I see contradictions. The spoon, the wine, the flicker of the lights, these are not random. We are in a web, Hastings, and Hercule Poirot will untangle it." As the police began their questions, Hastings watched Poirot retreat to a corner, his expression serene, but his mind racing. The shadow of the crime had fallen over Nemean Hall, and only Poirot's relentless logic could pierce its darkness. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The dining room of Nemean Hall, now a sombre tableau of suspicion, buzzed with the arrival of Inspector Japp and his constables. The air was thick with the metallic tang of authority and the lingering scent of cyanide. Lady Beatrice Ashford's body had been carefully covered with a tablecloth, her presence a mute accusation at the head of the table. The guests, confined to the room under Japp's stern orders, shifted uncomfortably, their earlier civility fraying like an old tapestry. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small frame radiating a quiet authority that contrasted with Japp's bluster. Captain Hastings, stationed near the door, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and anticipation. Poirot's arrival at Nemean Hall had been a stroke of fortune, or, as Hastings suspected, no coincidence at all. The Belgian detective's knack for appearing where mysteries brood was almost uncanny. "Japp, mon vieil ami," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "You have arrived at a moment most opportune. A murder, and one of subtlety, has occurred. Hercule Poirot is at your disposal, Inspector Japp." A stocky man with a weathered face and a are the threads of our web. "Hastings, mon ami, what did you observe during the toast?" Hastings, caught off guard, cleared his throat. "Well, I noticed everyone raise their glasses, except young Julian Mortimer, who said he drank water. The lights went out just as Lady Beatrice proposed the toast. There was a cry, a crash, and when the lights returned, she was gone." "Précisément," Poirot said, nodding. "The timing. It is no accident. Someone used the darkness to their advantage. But how was the poison introduced? The footman poured from one decanter, yet only Lady Beatrice's glass was fatal. Curious, no?" Japp turned to the footman, who stood rigid by the sideboard. "You, lad, you're sure you poured the same wine for everyone?" The footman, a young man named Thomas, nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir, all from the same decanter." "I swear it." Poirot's gaze drifted to the sideboard, where the decanter stood, its crystal facets catching the candlelight. He approached it, his movements deliberate, and leaned close without touching. And yet, only one glass carried death. We must consider the possibility that the poison was added to the glass itself, not the decanter. "Thomas, you left the room briefly before the toast, oui?" Thomas flushed. "Only for a moment, sir, to fetch the dessert tray from the kitchen." The glasses were already set on the table. Poirot's moustache twitched, and in that moment, anyone could have approached the table. "Bon, now, let us hear from the guests. Inspector, with your permission, I shall begin my inquiries." Japp sighed, clearly resigned to Poirot's methods. "Go on, then. But don't go stirring up trouble without evidence." Poirot smiled faintly and turned to the assembled company. "Mesdames et messieurs, Hercule Poirot does not accuse. He observes, he listens, and he seeks the truth. Each of you will speak with me, and together we shall illuminate the shadows of this crime." He began with Sir Reginald Ashford, who sat heavily in his chair, his florid face now pale. "Sir Reginald, you are the brother of the late Lord Henry, oui?" Lady Beatrice spoke of a codicil to his will. "What can you tell me of it?"
Clara's voice trembled. She took an interest in my career, sponsored my last play in London. I owed her everything. "And yet," Poirot said softly, "you seem afraid. Of what, or of whom?" Clara's eyes darted to the others, then back to Poirot. "I'm not afraid. I'm just shocked. She was so alive, so commanding." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her trembling hands. He moved on to Dr. Grayson, who stood with clinical detachment. "Doctor, you identified the poison. You are familiar with cyanide, oui?" Grayson's gaunt face tightened. "As a physician, I know its effects. It's rare, but not impossible to obtain. In hospitals, it's used in small quantities for certain treatments. But I assure you, I had no part in this." "Of course," Poirot said smoothly. "And you, Madame Mortimer?" Evelyn Mortimer's sharp eyes met his without flinching. "I have nothing to hide, Monsieur Poirot. Beatrice and I were old friends, though we had our differences.
Her husband's will was a point of contention, but I'm not so petty as to kill over it. Her son, Julian, snorted softly, earning a glare from his mother. Poirot's attention shifted to him. And you, Monsieur Mortimer, you did not drink the wine? A fortunate choice, perhaps? Julian's sullen expression hardened. I told you, I don't like wine. I didn't know she'd die. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. No one knows the future, monsieur, but the past, that we can uncover. Finally, he addressed Victor Crane, the solicitor, who clutched his briefcase like a shield. Monsieur Crane, you knew of the codicil. Its contents, they were significant? Crane hesitated, his voice low. They altered certain inheritances. I was to clarify the details tomorrow. That's all I'll say for now. Poirot nodded, stepping back. Merci, all of you. The truth, it is like a mosaic, each piece small, but together a picture emerges. As Japp began his own interviews, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, what do you make of our cast? A family divided, a friend with
Leather-bound volumes, bearing witness to the unfolding drama. The police, under Inspector Japp's direction, had secured the dining room as a crime scene, leaving Poirot to conduct his inquiries in this quieter, more intimate setting. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his notebook open, ready to record the nuances of each conversation as Poirot began his methodical unraveling of the truth. Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly in his lap. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, seemed to pierce through the facades of the suspects. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice calm but commanding, Hercule Poirot seeks not to accuse, but to understand. Each of you holds a piece of the truth. Speak plainly, and we shall find the path to justice. He began with Sir Reginald Ashford, who entered the library with the bluster of a man unaccustomed to being questioned. His loud waistcoat clashed with the sombre mood, and his hands fidgeted with a gold pocket watch. Sir Reginald, Poirot said, you spoke of the codicil with some irritation. Tell me, what did you fear it contained? Sir Reginald's florid cheeks reddened further. Fear? Nonsense, Poirot, I didn't fear anything. But Beatrice was always meddling with Henry's estate. The codicil, she hinted it might cut me out entirely. After all I did for my brother, it's an insult. Poirot's moustache twitched. An insult, oui. And one worth killing for, perhaps? Sir Reginald's eyes bulged. Now see here. I loved Beatrice in my way. I was here to talk sense into her, not this. Bon, Poirot said smoothly. And where were you when the lights flickered? Your hands, they were not on your glass. I was holding my glass, same as everyone, Sir Reginald snapped. When the lights went out, I didn't move, couldn't see a blasted thing. Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a wave. Merci, you may go, for now. Next came Clara Vane, her delicate frame wrapped in a shawl, her eyes red from crying. She sat opposite Poirot, her hands twisting the hem of
As Poirot's eyes softened, but his scrutiny remained. Merci, mademoiselle. Courage. Now Dr. Leonard Grayson entered next, his gaunt face composed, but his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on his knee. Doctor, Poirot began, you recognized the poison at once. Cyanide is not common knowledge, no? Where did you learn of it? Grayson's voice was steady, clinical. Medical training, Monsieur Poirot. I've seen cyanide poisoning once before, in a hospital case. It's unmistakable, rapid, brutal. But I had no access to such a substance here. And yet, Poirot said, leaning forward, you were near Lady Beatrice when the lights flickered. You moved quickly to her side after. Did you see anything unusual? Grayson's eyes flickered, just for a moment. It was dark. I heard the glass break, a cry, hers, I think. I couldn't see who was where. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, doctor. We shall speak again." Mrs. Evelyn Mortimer strode in with the confidence of a woman who feared no one. Her sharp features and piercing gaze met Poirot's without flinching. "Madame," Poirot said, "you and Lady Beatrice were friends, yet you spoke of differences. What were they?" Evelyn's lips curled slightly. "Beatrice and I were rivals as much as friends. She inherited Henry's fortune while I got scraps. The codicil, well, I suspected it might right some wrongs, but she was cagey about it. And your son, Julian," Poirot said. "He did not drink the wine. A coincidence, perhaps?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Julian's a teetotaler, always has been. If you're suggesting he had something to do with this, you're barking up the wrong tree." Poirot smiled faintly. "I bark at no tree, madame. I merely observe." Finally, Julian Mortimer slouched into the chair, his sullen demeanor unchanged. "Monsieur Mortimer," Poirot said, "you are young, yet you carry a weight. You did not drink, and you watched your mother closely at dinner. What troubled you?" Julian's jaw tightened. "Nothing troubled me. I just don't like these stuffy dinners. Beatrice was always going on about the estate, the codicil. It was boring. Boring. Boring." Poirot.
Whose hand turned it? He moved to the window, gazing out at the darkened lawns. "We must examine the dining room again. The glass, the spoon, the decanter, these are not silent. They speak to Hercule Poirot." Hastings nodded, though his mind swirled with questions. "Do you think the poison was in the glass before the wine was poured?" Poirot turned, his expression grave. "It is possible, Hastings. But if so, how was it placed there? And by whom? The darkness was their ally, but the light of logic will betray them." As they prepared to rejoin Jap, Poirot paused, his gaze falling on a small brass key on the library table, left behind by one of the guests. "Curieux," he murmured, pocketing it discreetly. "The smallest things, Hastings, often unlock the greatest secrets." The investigation was deepening, and Poirot's method, relentless, precise, and unyielding, was beginning to cast its net over Nemean Hall. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings Emerge. The atmosphere in Nemean Hall had grown taut as a bowstring, the grandeur of its oak-panelled halls now overshadowed by the spectre of murder. The guests, confined to the drawing-room under Inspector Japp's watchful eye, exchanged furtive glances, their earlier civility replaced by a palpable unease. Hercule Poirot, with Captain Hastings at his side, had returned to the dining-room, where the scene of Lady Beatrice Ashford's death remained untouched, a grim still life preserved for scrutiny. Poirot stood by the mahogany table, his gaze fixed on the shattered remnants of Lady Beatrice's wineglass. The faint scent of cyanide lingered, a ghostly reminder of the crime's brutality. Hastings, ever attentive, watched as Poirot crouched to examine the shards, his gloved fingers hovering, but not touching. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "Observe the glass. The break is irregular, yes, but the base, it is intact. And see here, the spoon beside her plate. Its discoloration, it is not mere tarnish, it is not mere tarnish."
"All right. The cook swears it's not hers, and the staff's in a panic." Poirot took the vial, holding it to the light. "Curieux. Cyanide so conveniently discovered. And yet, it is too obvious, no? A murderer does not leave such a calling card unless they wish to mislead." "A red herring, you mean?" Hastings said, catching on. "Précisément," Poirot replied. "The vial, the lingering actress, these are distractions, but Hercule Poirot sees through the fog. Come, let us return to the drawing-room. The true clues lie in the hearts of our suspects.
The drawing-room was a study in tension. Sir Reginald Ashford paced by the fireplace, his bluster subdued by nervous energy. Clara Vane sat on a settee, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting to the door. Dr. Leonard Grayson stood by a window, his gaunt face impassive, while Mrs. Evelyn Mortimer and her son Julian occupied opposite ends of the room, their silence heavy with unspoken conflict. Victor Crane, the solicitor, clutched his briefcase, his spectacles glinting as he watched Poirot enter. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "A vial of cyanide has been found in the kitchen. A clumsy clue, perhaps, but it raises questions. Who among you has knowledge of poisons?" Dr. Grayson spoke first, his tone measured. "As I said, Monsieur Poirot, my medical training familiarized me with cyanide. But I have no access to it here, nor reason to use it." Evelyn Mortimer's sharp voice followed. "You're quick to defend yourself, Doctor." But Beatrice was no fool. She'd have known if someone was slipping poison into her wine. Clara's voice trembled as she interjected. "I didn't touch the sideboard. I was adjusting my necklace. It had caught on my dress. Thomas must have misunderstood." Poirot's gaze settled on her, gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, your distress is noted. But tell me, what did Lady Beatrice mean by needing you for something important?" Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the pearls. She wanted me to stay on."
"Lose?" Poirot pressed. Crane glanced at Sir Reginald, then away. "I cannot say." "Not yet," Sir Reginald exploded. "Cannot say? Damn it, man, spit it out. If I'm to be accused, I'll have it plain." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the outburst. "Calm, Sir Reginald. The truth does not yield to temper. But tell me, you were near the table during the toast. Did you see anyone move toward Lady Beatrice?" Sir Reginald's bluster faltered. "It was dark, Poirot. I heard the glass break, that's all. I didn't see who was where." "Bon," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "The darkness, it hides much. But the light of reason will reveal all." As the guests dispersed under Japp's orders to remain in the house, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, what do you make of this vial? Too convenient, oui?" Hastings nodded. "It's as if someone wanted it found. To point the finger at Clara, perhaps?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "But the spoon, Hastings, the spoon is the key. It was not used for the meal, yet it bears a mark. And the key I found in the library, small, brass, unclaimed. It unlocks something. But what?" He paused, his gaze distant. "The codicil is the heart of this matter. It stirred greed, fear, or vengeance. We must learn its contents, and we must watch our suspects closely. The red herrings, they multiply. But Hercule Poirot will not be swayed." As they rejoined Japp, who was coordinating with the constables, Poirot's mind was already turning over the clues, the vial, the spoon, the key, the flicker of the lights. The web of deception was tightening, and Poirot's little grey cells were poised to unravel it. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning after Lady Beatrice Ashford's murder dawned grey and heavy over Nemean Hall, the mist clinging to the Hertfordshire hills like a shroud. Inside, the manor's opulence felt hollow, its corridors echoing with the weight of suspicion. The dining room remained sealed, guarded by a constable, while it opens a safe where it's kept. Poirot's moustache twitched with approval. "Bien pensé, Hastings. You begin to see with the eyes of logic. The codicil is the pivot of this crime, and this key may lead us to it. But first, we return to the dining room.
There is a clue I must examine more closely." They slipped past the constable, who nodded at Poirot's quiet authority, and entered the dining room. The scene was unchanged. Lady Beatrice's chair now empty, the shattered wine-glass, and the discoloured silver spoon. Poirot knelt beside the table, his gloved hand hovering over the spoon. "This spoon, Hastings, it was not used for the meal. The menu was consommé, pheasant, and soufflé, none requiring a spoon. Yet it bears a mark, a faint green tinge. Why?" Hastings leaned closer, squinting. "It's not tarnish, is it? Could it be residue from the poison?" Poirot shook his head. "No, not cyanide. Cyanide leaves no such colour. This is something else, a chemical, perhaps, or a trace of something handled before the crime. We must have it analysed. But its presence beside Lady Beatrice's plate is no accident." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. "And the lights, Hastings. The flicker at the precise moment of the toast. I have spoken with the butler, who confirms the house's wiring is modern, reliable. This was no fault of electricity. It was sabotage." "Sabotage?" Hastings echoed, startled. "You mean someone tampered with the lights to create the darkness?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "The darkness gave the murderer their moment. But how was it done? A switch? A fuse? A clever trick? We must investigate the electrical panel." They moved to the service corridor, where a discreet panel housed the manor's electrical controls. Poirot, with the butler's reluctant assistance, opened it to reveal a maze of wires and fuses. His keen eyes spotted a loose connection, a wire deliberately tugged free. "Voilà," he murmured. "Not an accident, but a plan." Someone knew the layout of this house. Hastings's mind raced. But who? The staff? One of the guests? Poirot's expression was enigmatic. "That, mon ami."
Library. They encountered Inspector Japp, his face grim. "Poirot, we've got trouble. The vial of cyanide from the kitchen. It's gone missing from the evidence bag. Someone's tampered with it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Tampered, Japp? Or removed to protect the guilty? This is no mere theft. It is a move in the game. Who had access to the evidence?" Japp scratched his chin. "Only my men and the staff, but the guests were milling about earlier. Could have been any of them." "Bon," Poirot said. "Then we tighten the net. Let us speak again with Mademoiselle Vane. Her nervousness, it intrigues me." They found Clara Vane in the drawing-room, seated alone, her pearl necklace now abandoned on a side table. Her eyes widened at Poirot's approach. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found something?" Poirot sat opposite her, his demeanour gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, you were near the sideboard before dinner, adjusting your necklace. Tell me, did you see anyone else there? A movement? A gesture, perhaps?" Clara's hands trembled. I don't know. It was busy, people coming and going. I think I saw Julian near the table, but I wasn't paying attention." "Julian Mortimer," Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. "And the lights? Did you notice anything before they flickered?" Clara shook her head. "No, it was so sudden. I was holding my glass, then it went dark, and I heard the crash." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As Clara retreated, Hastings whispered, "Do you think she's hiding something, Poirot?" "Everyone hides something, Hastings," Poirot replied, "but Mademoiselle Vane's fear, it is not of guilt, I think, but of knowledge. She saw something even if she does not yet understand it." Poirot's attention shifted to the drawing-room's chandelier, its crystals catching the light. The lights, the spoon, the key, the missing vial, these are the details that speak, and the codicil. It whispers loudest of all. We are close, mon ami, to a truth most inconvenient. As more tangled by the hour,
Poirot had requested a private audience with Julian Mortimer, whose sullen demeanour had marked him as a figure of interest. The young man slouched into the library, his dark eyes defiant as Poirot took a seat opposite him. The brass key, the discoloured spoon, and the sealed envelope containing the codicil weighed heavily in Poirot's pocket. But he revealed nothing, his expression serene. "Monsieur Mortimer," Poirot began, his voice soft but piercing, "you are a man of few words, yet your silence speaks volumes. You did not drink the wine at dinner, a choice most fortunate. Tell me, what did you see when the lights flickered?" Julian's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. "I told you. I wasn't near her. I was sitting across the table, minding my own business. The lights went out, I heard the glass break, and that's it." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight quiver in Julian's voice. "And yet, Mademoiselle Vane saw you near the dining table before dinner. You were not, perhaps, adjusting something? A glass, a spoon?" Julian's face flushed. "Claire is mistaken. I was nowhere near the table. She's just trying to shift blame." "Shift blame?" Poirot echoed, leaning forward. "An interesting choice of words. What blame do you fear, monsieur?" Julian's defiance faltered, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't fear anything, I didn't like Beatrice, all right? She was always meddling, pushing mother around. But I didn't kill her." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Meddling, you say? With the codicil, perhaps? Did it threaten your inheritance?" Julian's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "I don't care about the money. Mother's the one obsessed with it. Ask her about her fights with Beatrice. They weren't exactly secret." "Bon," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And during the darkness of the toast, where were your hands?" "In my lap," Julian snapped. "I wasn't touching anything." "You're barking up the wrong tree," Poirot smiled faintly, dismissing him with a wave. "Merci, monsieur. We shall see which tree bears fruit." As Julian stood,
You accuse no one, mon ami. You merely tell Hercule Poirot what you saw." Thomas swallowed hard. "Well, sir, I saw Mr. Crane, the solicitor, near the table earlier. He was looking at the glasses, like he was checking them. I thought he was just being fussy, but now, curieux," Poirot murmured. "And the lights? Do you know who has access to the electrical panel?" Thomas nodded. "Only the butler, Mr. Hargreaves, and me, sir." "But the panel's in the service corridor. Anyone could have slipped in." Poirot thanked him and led Hastings back to the library, where Inspector Japp awaited, his face grim. "Poirot, we've got a problem." "The lab results on the spoon are back. It's not cyanide residue. It's copper sulfate of all things. Not deadly, but odd. What's it doing there?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with sudden clarity. "Copper sulfate, Japp? Most interesting. It is a substance used in gardening, oui? For treating plants, and yet it appears on a spoon unused for the meal. This is no coincidence." Hastings frowned. "Gardening? But who in this house is handling chemicals like that?" Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the table. "A question we must answer." The spoon, the key, the missing vial, the tampered lights, these are not random. They form a pattern, and the codicil is at its heart. He withdrew the sealed envelope from his pocket, turning it over in his hands. "I have resisted opening this, Hastings, for to know its contents too soon may cloud the judgment. But the time approaches. First, we must confront Monsieur Crane. His actions near the glasses intrigue me." They found Victor Crane in the drawing room, his pinched face pale as he clutched his briefcase. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot said, his voice sharp now, "you were seen near the dining table before dinner, examining the glasses. Why?"
Crane's spectacles glinted as he adjusted them nervously. I was ensuring everything was in order. Beatrice asked me to oversee the arrangements as her solicitor. And did these arrangements include poison? Poirot
Pattern. It is not yet complete. As they prepared to regroup with Jap, Poirot's thoughts turned to the codicil, still unopened in his pocket. Its secrets were the linchpin of the crime, and he knew the time to unveil them was drawing near. The lies were multiplying, but Hercule Poirot's little grey cells were closing in on the truth. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The fog outside Nemean Hall had thickened by midday, cloaking the manor in a ghostly veil that mirrored the tension within. The drawing room, once a haven of polished civility, now felt like a cage, its occupants pacing or sitting in strained silence. Hercule Poirot, with Captain Hastings at his side, sensed the moment was ripe for a breakthrough. The clues, the discolored spoon, the brass key, the tampered lights, the missing cyanide vial, had woven a complex web, but Poirot's little grey cells were poised to unravel a critical thread. Poirot had gathered the guests in the drawing room, their faces a gallery of unease. Sir Reginald Ashford's bluster had faded to a nervous fidgeting. Clara Vane's delicate features were drawn with exhaustion. Dr. Leonard Grayson's clinical calm seemed brittle. Evelyn Mortimer's sharp gaze darted suspiciously. Julian Mortimer slouched with barely concealed resentment, and Victor Crane clutched his briefcase as if it were a lifeline. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook ready, watching Poirot with a mix of skepticism and grudging respect. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "we stand at a crossroads in this affair. Lady Beatrice Ashford was murdered, poisoned by cyanide in her wine. The clues, they point to a plan most deliberate. But the heart of this crime lies not only in the act, but in the why, the codicil to Lord Henry's will. It is the key, no? And yet, one of you holds a truth that will crack this mystery open." He paused, his green eyes scanning the room, letting the silence weigh on them. Clara Vane's hands trembled, and she bit her lip, her eyes welling with tears. Poirot's gaze softened, sensing her fragility. "Mademoiselle Vane," he said gently, "you have carried a burden since last night. You saw something, oui? Speak now, and let the truth lighten." Child landed like a thunderclap. Julian Mortimer's head snapped up, his sullen mask cracking. "A child," he spat, his voice raw. "What's that supposed to mean?" Was she saying I'm not hers? Evelyn Mortimer's sharp intake of breath cut through the room. "Julian, be quiet," she snapped, but her voice trembled, betraying a crack in her composure. Poirot's eyes gleamed, seizing the moment. "Madame Mortimer, you react strongly. This mention of a child, it touches a nerve, no? Perhaps you know of this betrayal?" Evelyn's lips tightened into a thin line. "You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot." Beatrice was always dramatic. If she spoke of a child, it was probably some sentimental nonsense about charity or legacies. But Julian was not appeased. He stood, his fists clenched, his face a storm of emotion. "No, Mother, you're lying." "You and Beatrice were always whispering about the past, about Father's will. If there's a child, if it's about me, I deserve to know." The room seemed to hold its breath. Hastings, gripping his notebook, felt the air shift. This was the emotional turning point Poirot had been waiting for. Someone's facade had cracked, and the truth was seeping through. Poirot's voice was calm, almost hypnotic. "Monsieur Mortimer, your anger, it is understandable. But let us be precise. You believe Lady Beatrice's codicil threatened your place in this family, oui? And you, Madame Mortimer, you fear what this codicil reveals. Why?" Evelyn's composure shattered. She rose, her voice low but fierce. "Enough, Poirot."
You want the truth? Fine. Beatrice and I quarreled years ago over Henry's will. He left me a pittance, claiming I'd mismanaged my own fortune. But the codicil, she hinted it would expose something about Julian, something that would ruin us. I begged her to keep it quiet, but she wouldn't listen. Julian stared at his mother, his eyes wide with betrayal. Ruin us? What did she know, Mother?
Placed copper sulfate on a spoon, perhaps to distract, perhaps to mislead. One of you tampered with the lights to cloak your actions, and one of you poisoned Lady Beatrice to silence her forever. Hercule Poirot will find you. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down. Clara sobbed quietly. Sir Reginald's hands shook, and Dr. Grayson's clinical detachment seemed strained. Japp, sensing the moment, stepped forward. Right, Poirot. You've stirred them up. Got any hard evidence to back this up? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Evidence, Japp. It is coming. The spoon has spoken, the key has opened a door, and now the heart has revealed a crack. We are close, mon ami. As the guests were dismissed to their rooms under strict orders not to leave, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon cher Hastings, the codicil, it is time. This talk of a child, a betrayal, it changes everything. We must read it, but carefully, for it will point to the killer. Hastings nodded, his pulse quickening. Do you think Julian's involved? Or Evelyn? Poirot's eyes were distant, his mind weaving the clues together. The truth, Hastings, is like a mirror. It reflects what we dare to see. The codicil will show us the face of the murderer, but first we must ensure no more lies obscure it. As they prepared to open the envelope, the fog outside seemed to creep closer, and the secrets of Nemean Hall pressed ever tighter around them.
Chapter 9. The Trap is Set.
The fog outside Nemean Hall clung to the windows like a conspirator, muffling the world beyond and intensifying the claustrophobic tension within. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had gathered the suspects once more, pulsed with a nervous energy, each guest a taut string ready to snap. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his notebook clutched tightly, sensing that Poirot was orchestrating a pivotal moment in the investigation. The Belgian detective, his patent leather shoes gleaming and his mustache impeccably symmetrical, stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding silence. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice a blend of calm authority and theatrical flair. The time has come to tighten the net. Lady Beatrice Ashford was murdered, her life extinguished by cyanide in her wine. The clues, the discolored spoon, the tampered lights, the missing vial, the brass key, point to a mind both cunning and desperate. But it is the codicil, this document of secrets, that holds the heart of the crime. And now, Hercule Poirot will lay a trap. He produced the sealed envelope from his pocket, holding it aloft like a talisman. The red wax seal, bearing Lord Henry Ashford's initials, gleamed in the lamplight. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Sir Reginald Ashford's eyes widened. Clara Vane's hands trembled. Dr. Leonard Grayson's gaunt face tightened. Evelyn Mortimer's sharp gaze locked on the envelope. Julian Mortimer's sullen demeanor shifted to alertness, and Victor Crane's spectacles slipped down his nose. This codicil, Poirot continued, contains the truth Lady Beatrice died to protect, or to conceal. Tonight, I shall read it aloud, here, before you all. But first, I ask you to consider, who among you feared its contents so greatly that murder became the only path? Evelyn Mortimer's voice cut through the silence, sharp and defiant. You're playing games, Poirot. If you know something, say it plainly. What's in that codicil?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience," eyes darting to Julian. She mentioned Julian once, said he was troubled, that he needed guidance. I thought she meant to help him." Julian's face darkened, and he shot to his feet. "Help me! She was always meddling, poking into my life. I didn't need her charity, and I didn't touch her wine." Evelyn grabbed her son's arm, her voice low and urgent. "Julian, sit down." "Don't give him ammunition." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ammunition, Madame Mortimer. An interesting choice of words. But let us consider another detail. The spoon with copper sulfate, a substance used in gardening, oui? Who among you has access to the gardens of Nemean Hall?" Sir Reginald cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "The gardens?" Beatrice was mad about them, always fussing over her roses. "But I don't see what that has to do with anything." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Everything, Sir Reginald, has to do with something. The spoon was a distraction, perhaps, meant to draw attention from the true method of the poison. And the lights, tampered with to create a moment of chaos. Someone in this room is a master of misdirection." Dr. Grayson spoke, his tone measured but strained. "Monsieur Poirot, you're implying one of us tampered with electrical panel. But surely the staff had more access than we did." Poirot nodded, as if conceding the point. "We, doctor, the staff. Yet the footman, Thomas, saw Monsieur Crane near the dining table before dinner, examining the glasses. Monsieur Crane, care to explain?" Victor Crane's face paled, his fingers tightening on his briefcase. "I told you, I was ensuring the table was properly set. Beatrice was particular about such things." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice cutting, "you knew the codicil's contents. Did it threaten your position, perhaps? Or someone else's?" Crane's voice wavered. I was bound by confidentiality. I can't say more." Poirot's smile was cold. "You will say more, monsieur, when the time comes. But now, let us test the trap."
Some actress. Julian's eyes burned with fury, but he said nothing, his fists clenched. Poirot watched them all, his trap sprung, their reactions a map to their motives. "Mes amis," he said, folding the codicil, "the truth is laid bare. Lady Beatrice intended to reveal Mademoiselle Vane as her husband's heir. One of you could not allow this. One of you poisoned her to stop it. The trap is set, and the guilty will soon betray themselves." Inspector Japp, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "Blimey, Poirot, you've stirred the hornet's nest. But where's the proof?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The proof, Japp, is in the details. The spoon, the key, the lights, they point to one hand, and that hand will falter under pressure." As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, the codicil has lit the fuse. The murderer is among us, and they will act again to protect their secret. We must watch closely, for the next move will reveal all." The trap was set, and Nemean Hall held its breath, waiting for the killer to stumble. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The fog outside Nemean Hall had begun to lift, but within its walls, the atmosphere remained heavy with suspicion and dread. The drawing room, now a stage for Hercule Poirot's final act, was lit by the flickering glow of the chandelier, casting long shadows across the faces of the gathered suspects. Sir Reginald Ashford, Clara Vane, Dr. Leonard Grayson, Evelyn Mortimer,
Julian Mortimer and Victor Crane sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes fixed on Poirot, who stood at the center, his small frame radiating an almost tangible authority. Captain Hastings, positioned near the fireplace, clutched his notebook, his heart pounding with anticipation. The moment of truth had arrived. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we have reached the denouement of this tragic affair. Lady Beatrice Ashford was murdered, poisoned by cyanide in her wine."
Sulfate was a distraction, meant to confuse. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. First, the lights. The electrical panel was tampered with, a wire loosened to cause a brief blackout. Only someone familiar with the house could have done this. The staff had access, but so did one of you, who knew the service corridor from prior visits. Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Grayson. "Doctor, you are a man of precision, accustomed to hospital wards where electrical systems are critical. You were seen near the service corridor before dinner, were you not?" Grayson's gaunt face paled, but he shook his head. "I was checking the house's layout, pure curiosity. I didn't touch the panel." Poirot nodded, moving on. "The spoon, then. Copper sulfate, a gardening chemical, was found on a spoon unused for the meal. Why? To suggest another poison, to mislead. Lady Beatrice's roses were her pride, and the gardener's shed contains such chemicals. But who had access?" He turned to Sir Reginald. "Monsieur, you spoke of Beatrice's love for her gardens. You, as her brother-in-law, often walked those paths with her. Did you handle such substances?" Sir Reginald's florid face reddened. "I'm no gardener, Poirot. I wouldn't know copper sulfate from sugar syrup." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps, but let us consider the key. It unlocked the drawer containing the codicil left carelessly in the library. Who dropped it? And the vial of cyanide, so conveniently found, then stolen from the police. These are not accidents. They are the work of a mind desperate to conceal." He paused, his eyes locking on Victor Crane. "Monsieur Crane, you are the solicitor, privy to the codicil's secrets. You were seen near the dining table, checking the glasses. You knew the codicil would ruin Sir Reginald and Madame Mortimer. Did you act to protect a client, or yourself?" Crane's spectacles glinted as he stammered, I was doing my duty. I didn't touch the wine or the key." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "And yet, the truth points elsewhere. The codicil's revelation of Mademoiselle Vane as Lord Henry's daughter threatened many."
But Vane as Lord Henry's daughter, born of a liaison. But it also implied another truth, that you, Julian, are not Evelyn's natural son, but an adopted heir, taken to secure her place in the Ashford fortune. Lady Beatrice knew this and planned to expose it, stripping you of your claim. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's a lie!" But Julian's face crumpled, his defiance breaking. "You knew," he whispered to his mother. "You knew and didn't tell me." Poirot pressed on, his voice rising. "You, Madame Mortimer, could not allow this truth to surface. You had motive, your son's future. You had means, cyanide, perhaps obtained through old connections, hidden in your luggage. And you had opportunity. During the darkness, you slipped the poison into Lady Beatrice's glass, a glass you ensured was hers by marking it with a faint scratch, visible only to you." Evelyn's eyes widened, but she shook her head. "You have no proof." Poirot produced the brass key. "This key, dropped in the library, was yours, madame. It matches the lock on your jewelry case, where you hid the cyanide before moving it to the kitchen as a false clue. The spoon with copper sulfate, you placed it to suggest another poison, knowing Beatrice's gardening habits would mislead us. And the lights, you learned the house's layout during your many visits, enough to tamper with the panel." Evelyn's composure shattered. "You're mad! I didn't—" But Julian's voice cut through, raw with pain.
Mother, stop! Did you do it? Did you kill her to keep me? Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she sank into her chair. I couldn't lose you, Julian. You're my son, blood or not. Beatrice would have taken everything, our name, our future. I had to stop her. The room was silent, the confession hanging like a guillotine. Inspector Japp stepped forward, his face grim. Evelyn Mortimer, you're under arrest for the murder of Lady Beatrice Ashford. As the constables moved to escort her, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression sombre. Mon ami, the heart can drive us to terrible deeds. Madame Mortimer acted for love, but love twisted by fear. The codicil revealed that
Hastings, seated nearby with his notebook now closed, felt a mix of awe and melancholy at the resolution of the case. Inspector Japp, having overseen Evelyn's removal to the local constabulary, returned to the drawing room, his face etched with the fatigue of a man who had seen too many such endings. "Well, Poirot," he said, mopping his brow, "you've done it again. Wrapped it up neat as a parcel. But blimey, what a mess. Family secrets, poison, all for a bit of inheritance." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, though his expression was sombre. "Not for inheritance alone, Japp. For love, twisted by fear and pride. Madame Mortimer believed she was protecting her son, but in doing so, she destroyed him." Hastings glanced at Julian Mortimer, who sat slumped in an armchair, his face pale and his eyes distant. The revelation that he was not Evelyn's natural son, coupled with her confession to murder, had left him adrift. Clara Vane, now revealed as Lord Henry's daughter, sat apart, her delicate features softened by a quiet resolve, as if grappling with her newfound identity. Sir Reginald Ashford, his bluster extinguished, stared into the fire, while Dr. Leonard Grayson and Victor Crane exchanged uneasy glances, their roles in the drama secondary but not blameless. Poirot addressed the group, his voice gentle but firm. "Mesdames et messieurs, the tragedy of Nemean Hall is complete. Lady Beatrice Ashford sought to right a wrong, to acknowledge Mademoiselle Vane as her husband's heir. But truth, it is a dangerous thing when it threatens the heart. Madame Mortimer could not bear the exposure of her secret, that Julian, her adopted son, would lose his claim. She acted with precision, using cyanide from her past connections, marking Lady Beatrice's glass with a scratch, tampering with the lights to create her moment. The spoon with copper sulfate was her misdirection, a false clue to suggest another poison." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But Hercule Poirot sees beyond the tricks. The key, dropped in the library, unlocked her jewelry case, where she hid the poison. The lights, sabotaged with a loosened wire, betrayed her familiar.
Reginald stirred, his voice gruff. "And the estate?" "What happens now, with Beatrice gone and the codicil revealed?" Poirot turned to Victor Crane, who adjusted his spectacles nervously. "Monsieur Crane, as solicitor, you will confirm the codicil's validity." "Mademoiselle Vane inherits half the estate, as Lord Henry intended. The rest, it falls to the courts, no?" Crane nodded, his voice low. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. The codicil is legal. Clara, Miss Vane, will be recognized." Clara's eyes glistened, but she nodded, a quiet strength emerging. "I never wanted this, but I'll honor Beatrice's wishes." Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped. "The puzzle is solved, mes amis. The truth is laid bare, and justice will follow. But Hercule Poirot reminds you, the greatest crime is not the act, but the lie that festers in the heart. Guard against it." With that, he inclined his head, signaling the end of his role. Jep clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a marvel, Poirot, but you make my job harder with all this drama. Come on, let's get you and Hastings back to London." As the guests dispersed, some to pack, others to face their altered futures, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, you see now the power of the little grey cells. They see what the eyes cannot. The contradictions, the emotions, the truths hidden in plain sight." Hastings nodded, his voice soft. "It's always a marvel, Poirot, but a sad one." Evelyn loved Julian, but it led to murder. And Clara, she's gained a fortune, but lost a friend. Poirot's expression was philosophical. "We, Hastings, the human heart, it is a mystery greater than any crime. But we, you and I, we bring order to chaos. And now, we return to our quiet lives, until the next puzzle calls." As they stepped out into the crisp September air, the manor behind them stood silent, its secrets exposed.
Hertfordshire Hills. Sir Reginald Ashford, his inheritance diminished by the codicil, slumped in an armchair, his usual bluster replaced by a weary resignation. Dr. Leonard Grayson, his professional detachment intact, conversed quietly with Victor Crane, the solicitor, whose pinched face betrayed a lingering unease. Julian Mortimer, the young man at the heart of Evelyn's crime, had retreated to his room, unable to face the others. Poirot, his green eyes sharp yet contemplative, addressed the group one final time. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice carrying the weight of finality, "the tragedy of Nemean Hall is resolved, but its echoes will linger. Lady Beatrice Ashford sought to unveil a truth long buried, and for that she paid with her life. The codicil, it was not merely a document of inheritance, it was a mirror to the souls of those it touched." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Madame Evelyn Mortimer, driven by a mother's love, could not bear the exposure of her son's true origins. She poisoned Lady Beatrice, using cyanide slipped into a marked glass, cloaked by the darkness she engineered. The spoon with copper sulfate, the tampered lights, the stolen vial. These were her tools of deception, but they could not withstand the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. Clara Vane looked up, her voice soft but steady. "Monsieur Poirot, I still can't believe Beatrice knew I was her husband's daughter. Why didn't she tell me sooner? Could I have stopped this?" Poirot's expression softened, a rare glimpse of compassion breaking through his usual precision. "Mademoiselle Vane, you ask a question that haunts us all. What if? Lady Beatrice, she kept her silence to protect you, perhaps, from the pain of a truth too heavy. But the truth, it has a way of breaking free, and sometimes it brings destruction before it brings peace." Sir Reginald stirred, his voice gruff but subdued. "And what of the estate now, Poirot?"
Hercule Poirot Hastings, unable to stay silent, leaned forward. "Poirot, what about Julian? He's lost everything, his mother, his identity. What becomes of him now?" Poirot's eyes grew distant, his voice thoughtful. "The young Mortimer, he faces a journey most difficult. He is not defined by his mother's crime, nor by the blood he does not share. But he must find his own strength, Hastings. The truth has set him free, but freedom, it is a heavy burden. As the group began to disperse, preparing to leave Nemean Hall and its ghosts behind, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, you see now the cost of secrets. Lady Beatrice sought to right a wrong, but her silence bred mistrust, and mistrust bred murder. We, you and I, we bring light to the darkness, but we cannot undo the pain." Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. "It's a victory, Poirot, but a bitter one. Clara gains a fortune, but at what cost? And Julian? I can't imagine what he's feeling." Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise as ever. "The heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth. We solve the crime, but the wounds, they heal in their own time. Come, let us leave this place. London awaits, and perhaps a simpler mystery." As they stepped into the crisp afternoon air, the manor loomed behind them, its ivy-clad walls silent witnesses to the drama within. Inspector Japp joined them, his car idling nearby. "You've done it again, Poirot," he said, shaking his head, "but I'll be glad to see the back of this place." "Too many secrets for my taste." Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes on the horizon. "Secrets, Japp, are the shadows cast by truth, and Hercule Poirot, he is the light that banishes them." With that they climbed into the car, leaving Nemean Hall to its new chapter, a chapter written in truth, but paid for in blood. Chapter 13. The Weight of Legacy. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Nemean Hall, its golden rays doing with his characteristic blend of precision and gravitas. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice resonating in the vast hall, "the tragedy of Nemean Hall is resolved, but its lessons endure. Lady Beatrice sought to unveil a truth long hidden, that Mademoiselle Vane was her husband's daughter, and heir to his fortune. This truth, it sparked fear, greed, and ultimately murder. Madame Evelyn Mortimer, to protect her son's place, took a life. But the truth, it cannot be silenced forever." Clara Vane, standing near the grand staircase, her delicate features softened by a newfound resolve, spoke quietly. "Monsieur Poirot, I still struggle to understand why Beatrice kept this from me. I would have loved her as a sister, not just a patron. Now I inherit half an estate, but it feels empty." Poirot's expression was compassionate, his mustache twitching slightly. "Mademoiselle, the heart of Lady Beatrice was complex. She protected you, perhaps, from the scandal of your birth, hoping to reveal it when the time was right. But time, it is a thief, and her silence cost her dearly. You must carry this legacy with courage, for it is yours by right." Sir Reginald, his florid face subdued, cleared his throat. "And what of the rest of us, Poirot? The estate's carved up, and I'm left with crumbs. Beatrice's death hasn't changed that." Poirot's gaze was unyielding, but not unkind. "Monsieur, wealth is fleeting, but honor endures. You have lost a portion of the estate, oui, but you have gained the chance to live without the shadow of deceit. Embrace it." Dr. Grayson, his clinical demeanor softened by the ordeal, nodded. "You've done remarkable work, Monsieur Poirot. Your ability to see through the chaos, it's extraordinary." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, doctor. But it is not extraordinary. It is method. The little gray cells, they observe the details others overlook. The spoon with copper sulfate, a distraction. The tampered lights, a cloak for murder. The key, a link to Madame Mortimer's guilt. These are the tools of truth.
Victor Crane, clutching his briefcase, spoke hesitant.
Of friendship, for they share a bond of loss. Clara glanced up, her eyes meeting Poirot's. I'll try, Monsieur Poirot. He's angry now, but maybe in time, we can understand each other. Poirot nodded, satisfied. Bon. The legacy of Nemean Hall is not only wealth, but the chance for redemption. Use it wisely. As the group began to disperse, their farewells muted by the weight of the moment, Inspector Japp approached, his weathered face creased with a wry smile. Poirot, you've outdone yourself, but I'm glad to be done with this place. Too many secrets, too much heartache. Ready for London? Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise. Oui, Japp. London calls, with its simpler pleasures. A good cup of tisane, a quiet evening. But the mysteries, they will find us again. They stepped out into the crisp air, the Manor's ivy-clad facade looming behind them. The car awaited, its engine humming softly. Hastings glanced back, his thoughts lingering on the lives altered within those walls. It's strange, Poirot, he said as they settled into the car. You solved the crime, but the pain remains. Does it ever weigh on you? Poirot's gaze was fixed on the horizon, his voice soft but firm. Always, Hastings. But to bring order to chaos, to shine light on darkness. This is the duty of Hercule Poirot. The pain, it is the price of truth, and we must bear it. As the car pulled away, Nemean Hall receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its legacy a bitter-sweet testament to the power of truth and the cost of its pursuit. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The twilight cast a soft, melancholic glow over Nemean Hall, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to leave its somber halls for good. The Manor's grand facade, with its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys, stood as a silent witness to the unraveling of its secrets. Inside, the remaining guests, Clara Vane, Sir Reginald Ashford, Dr. Leonard Grayson, and Victor Crane, were packing their belongings, each grappling with the aftermath of Evelyn Mortimer's confession and the seismic shift brought by the codicil's revelation. Julian Mortimer, still reeling from the truth of his adoption, and his mother.
Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the suspects. It's hard to believe it all came down to Evelyn's fear for Julian. She thought she was protecting him, but she's left him more alone than ever. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile of agreement. We, Hastings, the heart, it drives us to acts both noble and terrible. Madame Mortimer's love for her son was her undoing, but it was a love fierce and true. Such is the paradox of human nature. The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation as Clara Vane descended the grand staircase, her delicate frame wrapped in a traveling cloak. She approached Poirot, her eyes clear but shadowed with emotion. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I'm leaving for London tomorrow to meet with the lawyers about the estate. I don't know how to feel about being Lord Henry's daughter. It's a gift I never expected, but it came at such a cost. Poirot inclined his head, his tone gentle. Mademoiselle Vane, you carry a legacy both heavy and precious. The wealth, it is yours by right, but the true inheritance is the chance to live authentically, free of secrets. Honor Lady Beatrice by doing so. Clara's lips trembled, but she nodded. I'll try. And I want to reach out to Julian. He's lost so much. Maybe I can help him, as family in a way. Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. A noble intention, mademoiselle. The bond of shared loss. It can heal wounds the law cannot touch. As Clara stepped away to bid farewell to the others, Sir Reginald approached, his usual florid bluster replaced by a weary pragmatism. Poirot, he said gruffly, you've turned this place upside down, but I suppose you've done right. I'm out of fortune, but I'll manage. Always do. Poirot's gaze was steady. Monsieur, wealth is a fleeting master. You have your name, your pride. Let them guide you now.
Sir Reginald grunted, offering a reluctant nod before turning away. Dr. Grayson and Victor Crane followed, each offering brief words of gratitude for Poirot's clarity in resolving the case. Crane, still clutched from past visits, gave her the darkness she needed. And her confession, it came when the codicil's truth broke her resolve. The little grey cells, they see what the heart tries to hide. Jap chuckled, shaking his head. You're a marvel, Poirot. Right, let's get you and Hastings to the station. London's waiting. As they stepped outside, the cool evening air greeted them, the Manor's silhouette fading into the dusk. Hastings glanced back, his voice soft. Poirot, do you ever wonder what happens to them after we leave? Clara, Julian, the others, they've got to rebuild from this. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise. Mon ami, we solve the crime, but the lives, they must heal themselves. Clara has a future to forge, Julian a past to reconcile. We give them truth, Hastings. That is our gift, and our burden. The car rolled down the gravel drive, leaving Nemean Hall behind. As the Manor vanished into the twilight, Poirot's thoughts turned to the next challenge. His little grey cells, ever ready for the mysteries that awaited. Chapter 15. The Departure. The twilight had deepened into a soft indigo dusk as the car carrying Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings wound its way through the Hertfordshire countryside, leaving Nemean Hall behind. The Manor's imposing silhouette faded into the horizon, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's relentless logic. Inside the car, the hum of the engine was a quiet counterpoint to the weight of the case now concluded. Hastings, seated beside his friend, gazed out at the passing fields, his mind still tangled in the emotional aftermath of the tragedy. Poirot, his posture impeccable and his moustache a study in symmetry, seemed lost in thought, his green eyes fixed on some distant point. Mon ami, Poirot said at last, his voice soft but resonant. You are pensive. The affair of Nemean Hall, it lingers in your heart, oui? Hastings sighed, turning to face his friend. Wounded, may yet find strength in her gesture. The future, it is theirs to shape. The car slowed as it approached the small railway station, its platform bathed in the glow of gas lamps. Inspector Japp, who had insisted on seeing them off, leaned forward from the front seat. Well, Poirot, another case for the books. You've got a knack for turning a mess into a masterpiece. But I'll be glad to get back to London's simpler crimes, pickpockets and pub brawls, none of this high society intrigue. Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement. Japp, you underestimate the simplicity of this case. A murder, it is always a matter of motive and method. The codicil was the spark, Madame Mortimer's fear the fuel. The spoon, the key, the lights, these were but tools of her deception. Hercule Poirot merely followed their trail. Japp chuckled, shaking his head. Merely, he says. You make it sound easy, but I've seen enough to know better. Right, here's your train. Safe travels, and try not to stumble into another murder before breakfast. As they stepped onto the platform, the distant whistle of the approaching train echoed through the evening air. Hastings adjusted his coat, glancing back toward the direction of Nemean Hall. Do you think we'll hear from them again, Poirot? Clara, Julian, the others? Poirot's gaze followed the tracks, stretching into the darkness. Perhaps, mon ami. The world is small, and the threads of fate they weave in curious ways. But for now, our part is done. We have given them the truth. Let them build upon it. The train pulled in with a hiss of steam, its carriages gleaming under the station lights. Poirot and Hastings boarded, settling into a quiet compartment. As the train began to move, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels seemed to mirror the steady pulse of Poirot's thoughts. Hastings leaned back, his voice soft. "It's strange, Poirot. Every case feels like a victory, but this one, it's left a mark. The cost of secrets, I suppose." Poirot nodded, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "The cost, oui. Secrets are the shadows of the soul, Hastings."
Hercule Poirot's genius.